And then we'll be back sometime in June to do business plan and that stuff. But the real hope here today is just walk you through sort of what's happening on the marketing side. And then we're going to end with some industry updates.
Great.
Perfect. Yeah, as Kevin mentioned, and I know you're new here, right? So a few of you are new, but what the idea here is that we present our business plan to you every year in the spring, and then it goes through the city council process. And within that business plan is a really ton of great information, but specifically a lot of goals around what we intend to execute on in the fiscal year that we're in right now. So we're halfway through that. A lot of my marketing updates are going to kind of touch on some of those goals that were in the business plan that we presented to y'all last spring. This opening slide is really just a chance to sort of talk about who we are and what drives us. I think Visit Bend operates differently than a lot of other organizations in the destination marketing world, where they outsource almost everything. And we believe in doing that entirely differently. And we bring everything in-house, and it makes us a lot more nimble and successful. But we're really passionate about this place. And I think that shows through in all of our work that we do. And it's really important that we're honoring all voices, all experiences, and being truly representational of maybe some of these groups who haven't gotten a chance to be represented previously in the history of Bend. So we're excited about the work that we do, and we're excited to welcome folks to Bend throughout all of our work. Guess we'll just start out by diving right in. So in those goals, we were talking a lot about how we intend to execute on driving folks to be interested in coming to Bend as a vacation destination. But Kevin in a few later slides is going to touch on some of the other things that we are doing also to make this place better. But marketing activities are by and large Visit Bend's largest economic development efforts. So about 50% of our budget goes to marketing specifically. And all of that is really intended, all of our marketing efforts, which I'm going to dive into in a few slides here, are really intended to drive traffic to visitbend.com, where it's designed to be a place to be inspirational and aspirational, representational of our stakeholders throughout the entire website experience. So we have nearly 10,000 pages on our website. We represent almost every business that operates within the tourism industry or even ancillary businesses to the tourism industry. And for several of them, that's their only web presence. So it's important that we are properly representing them and showcasing them to potential visitors to Bend. Our goals around website traffic in the business plan listed 1.2 million specific individual users, 5 million visits. As we stand right now, halfway through the fiscal year, we're more than halfway to that. We've seen just under 1.1 million visits from about 785,000 visitors. So we anticipate exceeding that number by the time you see us in the spring.
So those are monthly cumulative data points?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, we do things a little bit differently. So we tried doing things a little differently than you might normally see on slides and charts and stuff like that. But ask away, because it's more fun than me just talking. Influencer marketing. This is one of the places where we have found a lot of success. And it's also one of those words where I think a lot of folks hear it and they're like, ew, that's gross, it's cringe. But the truth of it is that our influencer program is built out to be, representative and very successful in terms of how we are investing these TRT dollars back into the promotion of tourism under state law. And the cool thing about that is that if you all follow us on social media, you can see some of what we're doing, but it allows us to be very targeted by who we speak to, who the influencers speak to, who their audience is, and how they portray the message. Influencer marketing, as I'm sure you all know, is really just like a digitally evolved word of mouth form of marketing that we can put money behind. And also, as I'm sure you know, like influencer marketing and word of mouth marketing is the most powerful form of marketing. So folks are going to listen to somebody who they deem to be a trustworthy source online. And it really plays into a lot of our customer journey, which I'm going to dive into in a second. But the thing we're most proud of is that our return on investment for influencer marketing is sitting at over 5,000%, which is not like we had to quadruple check the math on that. We've invested just under $100,000 and we've seen about a $4.8 million earned media value on those partnerships.
Looks like we have a hand up from Kelly, and I'd love to hear her question on this topic. So
yeah.
Oh, and Nate, I just got a heads up. Maybe if you can move the mic closer, maybe pop it to the other side while you're Yeah, you gotta be, they're not the most sensitive mics.
Hi, yeah, quick question. Can you talk a little bit about how you find the influencers and kind of like what criteria you're using to choose them?
Yeah, for sure. So there are a million different dashboards and platforms out there that sort of manage influencers. We use a program called Clear, K-L-E-A-R. It's they're owned by our PR software company, so it's a nice little package that all fits together. But really, what it allows us to do is dive in and find people where they live and figure out who their audiences are, and really, if all of those demographics align with what our target is. I don't know why I keep looking up there like the camera's there. Then we reach out and begin that conversation. A lot of them are also reaching out to us beforehand because they see other influencers, they all kind of birds of a feather stuff. So they'll reach out to us, intrigued about working with us, and we are able to use the software to determine whether or not they're worth our time, if their audience aligns with ours, if their geo-targeted locations of their followers align with ours, and ultimately if their values more than anything else align with ours, which is probably the most important part of all of that. And that it fits within our budget. So we don't go after like the Kim Kardashians of the world with millions of followers. Our sweet spot is in these what's referred to as micro or smaller influencers that have generally a following of like between 10 and 30,000. That's where we find to get the most value. They also are deemed more trustworthy by their followers, and they're really excited to work with us. So it's a great situation that works out well in the end and really drives that ROI for us. As you can see, that estimated media value of almost 4.9 million based off of less than $100,000 of investment.
So a couple of questions. Put that 100,000 into context of your total advertising spend this year. I'm sure it's a future slide, but.
Yeah, no. So it's, and we'll get into this when we talk about TRT collections and budgets overall, but our overall advertising spend in fiscal year 23 in specifically placed media is about 1.8 million. So it's a smaller piece of that. We spend, I'll get into this in the future slide, but we spend more money on things like search marketing, programmatic display marketing. We used to dabble a lot in the traditional side of things, TV, radio, and we aren't really doing that anymore because we can be more effective with our dollars and be more targeted and intentional with the messaging that we get out there in front of folks. So
yeah, that's great.
Yeah, small piece of the pie. It's something that, influencer marketing in general, I truly believe is the biggest piece of the future of digital marketing in general. It's not going anywhere. Social media is here to stay. This is just, like I said, the evolution of word of mouth.
Well, just looking at your example there, it's, love how conscious Bend is about the environment. They talk about the Bend Pledge. So the people that they might attract to Bend are like-minded people. So that's a great example of how you're doing this. And from what I've seen in the 5.5 years I've been on BDAB, there's been an evolution, and it started before my time, I'm sure, but in the last 3 to 4 years, the evolution of, we're not just targeting people to get people. It's not a numbers game we're playing. We're actually creating a culture and trying to create a certain type of visitor ethics. So
Absolutely.
I really appreciate that.
Yeah, it's truly intentional and something that we're really working on. And, we truly believe that Bend is for all and that there are educational opportunities throughout all of our messaging. And so this is just a way that we can influence those people who might share that mindset to want to consider Bend as a future destination and hopefully bring their best selves with them when they come here.
Yeah, that's great. And Kelly, did you have another question? I saw your hand up again.
I did. I just have one quick follow-up kind of on the point that Travis is making. So when you hire the influencers and they're like making sure you're aligned with Bend values and kind of your goals, do you also get the opportunity to kind of tell them what to post about? Like, does it go like, did you kind of help place this like leave no trace one, or is it more objective to what they fits with what they're doing?
It's kind of all of the above, and it sort of depends on the relationship that we're working with, whether we add them or they reach out to us. But throughout the conversation, before we get any contracts signed, we make it very clear what our guiding principles are and how that interweaves with everything that we do from a marketing front. And so I think, just like any partnership, we're not going to partner with somebody if our values are not aligned. If it's something that's just there because we know we're going to get a really good ROI on it, but doesn't check any other box, then we're not going to do it. So we also believe in one of the reasons we think this is working so well as a strategy is because we're not dictating everything that they do and say. And that means that they can be truly honest and open about their feelings and about the way that who they are, which means that their followers, who take a lot of what they say to make purchasing decisions are going to believe them more, are going to feel more connected to their message.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things where you say influencer marketing, people are like, see eyes roll, and but it's crazy how successful it is and how we can be so super targeted by who we're speaking to, the message that we're putting in front of them, and then how folks, what we see as kind of a lead time is that, and this is based on a really small amount of data and preliminary data, but we see about 10 to 12 months of lag time from when somebody sees an initial influencer message or ad and then actually makes it to Bend. But the cool thing about that is that they're using that throughout the entire customer journey to sort of influence their decisions on how they plan their vacation and what they decide to do when they're here.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely on board with influencer marketing. I can see the value here, and mostly just like interested in how you kind of handle the risk of maybe having a influencer that surprisingly isn't aligned with your values, or does something that like reflects poorly on Ben. But it sounds like you do an awesome job vetting and it works out.
Yeah, and I mean, there's we have even the contracts are built out in a way where we have clauses that kind of make sure that they understand that they can't be a bad human when they come to Bend. So it's important to us throughout that. And, there's follow-up conversations. A lot of these folks, we're finding that they want to come back and they want to work with us again. And we can evolve that messaging, and it helps to create that more sustainable visitor to our destination also over the course of time, which is really cool and just kind of an ancillary benefit we're seeing throughout this. Moving on to, I just mentioned our customer journey, and I just kind of want to touch on that because our customer journey is a 6-phase customer journey that starts with awareness at the very beginning and ends with this retrospective sort of phase at the end where they're reflecting on their vacation and they're thinking about what they want to do next. But we just launched a new campaign kind of coming out of the pandemic last year. It's called This Has Been, and the idea is that it's a campaign that really embodies that sense of childlike wonder and curiosity that children have if they're out in the forest for the first time, or they're driving down the Cascade Lakes Highway and they see South Sister and their eyes get all big and their mouth drops. And like, we want to capture that feeling for everybody, adult, child, or dog that comes to Bend for vacation. And the cool thing about that is that it really allows us to hone in our advertising efforts and how we can be effective at each of these stages. So what we've decided this year is that we're really focusing on the awareness, the research, and the planning phases. And these are also goals that are outlined in our business plan, but throughout it all, we have different tactics in order to reach our goals, and they're all spread out pretty evenly as far as efforts we put into them, in addition to the amount of money that we're spending, because we need to build and capture that customer as well as look at who these returning visitors might be, so that we're finding a way to stay top of mind for all of them. So on the awareness phase, a lot of our efforts focus around influencer marketing, because these are people who are living life day to day. They might be daydreaming while they're at their computer at their desk about a vacation, but they don't really know where they want to go or when they want to take that vacation. And so if we can put this messaging in front of them that's not super suggestive, it's not take a vacation to Bend right now, but it's just to make sure that Bend is on their mind when they're thinking about where they might want to go. And influencer marketing is super helpful for that, as well as some display marketing that we do, banner ads and that type of stuff that are on sites where travelers are more likely to visit. In that phase right now, we've seen, didn't write my numbers down. I did. We've seen about 25 million impressions served through our ads. This doesn't include influencer marketing specifically because those impressions are much higher, but I didn't want to include them in this because it would have sort of inflated the numbers. And then those, as y'all know, if you have browsed on any websites and you've seen banner ads and stuff like that, you're probably not likely to click on those. But again, it's meant to be like that more awareness, top of the funnel type stuff. So we're seeing about a 1.2% click-through rate. And the other number that we wanted to highlight is the industry average. And this is among travel and tourism hospitality businesses, but the industry average in that awareness phase is 0.38%. So we're seeing 4 times that click-through rate. 1.2% seems pretty measly, but it's four times better than the rest of the folks are doing. So moving into the research phase, that's when people have decided that they wanted to take a vacation, but they don't necessarily know where they want to be yet. But that's where we start getting into more of these advanced digital advertising efforts, including things like retargeting and paid search. So paid search is our most successful form here. We have over 10,000 keywords that we're bidding on right now throughout all different, planning, where they want to eat, event calendar stuff. And our search campaigns overall have a 25% click-through rate, which really brings this average up. But the industry average and even a click-through rate for a paid search campaign is around 4%. So we're blowing that out of the water at 25%. But other things that factor into the research phase are retargeting ads. So those display ads, but somebody has maybe been on our website, or they've been to our social media, or they've been to a place where some of that data can kind of grab onto them and follow them around and serve up a more tailored ad to what they are looking for. We've got different ads running depending on if somebody's a family member, if they're a male, if they're a female, if they're looking for different activities. And we know that based on what sites they visited on our website, so we can retarget them and be more intentional about the ads that they're seeing, which are going to hopefully prompt them to want to click. And then into the planning phase, that's when we even hone in more on those keywords and that retargeting. And then we also buy into efforts with folks like TripAdvisor, because folks know then between the research and the planning phase, they've decided they want to come to Bend. So now they're looking for things to actually do when they're on vacation. They're trying to find a place to stay. They're trying to find things to do with their family, where they should eat. And so our paid keyword efforts there are much more honed in on those things: places to eat in Bend, places to eat with a family, places to take my kids, things like that. And then when we're involved with an advertising campaign like TripAdvisor, we have this partnership with them that allows us to kind of own and manage all of the content on the Bend page and be very involved in everything that's going on there. So whether it's the forum or folks commenting, we can really engage in a different level that's going to really solidify folks choosing Bend as a destination. And then moving, further down into that, the journey, we hope that once they're here in Bend, they're going to realize how great it is and how kind the people are and how awesome of an experience it is. And from there, hopefully, in future years, as our campaign builds, we can get into those future planning or those future stages of our customer journey. But for now, this is where we feel like we can find the most success and also, start to attract new visitors, because as Kevin is going to show you in some later slides, what we feel like we're seeing is that during the course of the pandemic, Visit Bend didn't advertise at all. We took about 2 years off from advertising and marketing. And that has sort of led to this drop in general, I would say, top of funnel awareness for visitors when they're considering a destination or a place to go on vacation, because Bend was not top of mind for the last 3 years. Folks in Portland didn't see our ads. Seattle didn't see our ads. Bay Area didn't see our ads. And so other destinations that may have marketed throughout that might be more top of mind. And that's something where we are now sort of realizing this, and we're investing more in that top of funnel, earlier customer journey awareness stages, so that we can, again, be top of mind and not just rely on people who already know what Bend is.
So quickly on this slide, do you have an idea of spend by phase?
Oh, I would say it's split out. So everything that we do is digital marketing, and it is pretty even. Our keyword, our Google AdWords campaign, for example, is primarily in the research and planning phase. That's largely the biggest part of our budget. We spend between $20,000 and $30,000 a month on paid search. So you can do the math there, I guess. But our display and programmatic campaigns, where at the beginning of the phase, in the awareness phase, we're running more just those general display ads that are targeted based on demographics if folks know about them. That's about $10,000 a month, but then that ramps up in the research and planning phase, because it's more expensive to target somebody and to be more specific about who you are targeting. So the research and planning phases are a little more expensive, but that's a more qualified lead, I guess, is the way to look at it. And so you're spending more money to get them here, knowing that once they are here, that economic payoff is going to be immense. And I guess the last slide is just kind of a touch on some of that content production stuff that we've been investing in, because we also invest about $120,000 to $150,000 a year on content production. That's photo and video work that's getting seen. And the reason for that goes back to everything I just said. Really, it's important to have good, compelling, quality content in front of folks when they're making a purchasing decision, especially out where they're going to travel, or to be compelling when they're at the beginning of that phase in order to, be on their mind when they're thinking that they want to go on vacation somewhere. And so we're really looking at everything from like whether they're a family from the Bay Area who wants a more maybe cultural experience. So we're putting High Desert Museum creative out there. If they're a couple of friends who want to go on a ski trip, we're capturing content right there. Or if they're a couple who wants a more urban shopping, dining experience, we're also capturing content there. And we're telling those stories not only through paid media efforts, but also through our own media. So on our own social channels, we're seeing Facebook engagement is up 173% year over year just because of all this new content that we're pumping out and putting there. And we're repurposing it. One shoot can turn into, 30 plus pieces of content that we're putting out there and paid and owned content. Instagram engagement is up 280%. And we were going to play some videos today, but internet can be a little questionable. So I just say follow us on Instagram. But it's been a really fun way to not only tell our story in a more visual manner, but also, a lot of our stakeholders, I know Ben and I have had conversations specifically about like stakeholders reaching out and saying, hey, I just saw Visit Ben posted this great video of downtown. How can we get it? How can we share it to our followers? And so it's that whole rising tide floats all boats analogy where we're more than happy to, and we're doing this work on behalf of the community to rise up the business industry and to help them tell their stories better as well.
Looks like Jeremy has a question. Go ahead, Jeremy.
How did I do?
Yeah, thanks. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Great work and presentation. Interesting to see all the work you guys are doing on the digital side. I'm curious about the editorial side and doing sponsored content or placements in actual good old fashioned printed publications. Does your budget account for any of that? Do you guys do any of that type of work?
I will say in this fiscal year, we have that budgeted for, but we're not spending any money there. We're just kind of reinvesting it into these places where we're seeing bigger successes. We occasionally will do partnerships or co-op buys sort of when they come across our desk that, it might be something with whether it's a business like Mount Bachelor or it's another destination organization like Travel Oregon or something who's coming to us and saying, hey, we have this opportunity for this sponsored post that's going to run digitally and in print, and it's going to be in a magazine, and it's kind of that more traditional stuff. That money is in our budget to look at, but as we reconcile our budgets and our media buying efforts every month, we kind of look at it and we say, okay, here's what's working. Let's continue to push on the digital front, or this opportunity is here. Let's save this money so that we can execute on that.
Got you. Thank you. And then the following question, how do you go about capturing, for lack of a better word, feedback, positive or negative, neutral, from visitors, and understanding the experience that people are having in that last leg of their visitor journey to Bend? And how does that information, if you capture it, influence what you guys do going forward?
Yeah. So are you referring to that sort of that retrospective kind of last phase after people have?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, so we rely heavily on feedback from our stakeholders. So, whether there are board meetings or industry communications, we're always hoping that folks will reach out to us and follow up. And we're also asking those questions so that we can be better about how we're communicating and also what we can do to help craft that visitor experience while they're here. We also conduct a lot of research. So whether they are visitor intercept surveys that we're doing while folks are here, whether they're email related surveys, conversations on social media, we're trying to capture all of that and just be in constant communication so that it's not like ever necessarily something huge that we have to do, although there are these big ambitious projects that we're looking to chew off, but it's also just kind of continual progression of being better by taking that feedback and implementing it as soon as possible in a way that we feel like we can actually move the bar.
Got you. Thank you.
Thanks for getting City Hall into promotional picture for the first time. If I'm right there.
I love that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through a few other VisitBend programs and then jump into like the industry data and where we think we're going. So I think I want to start with sort of Nate covered all the stuff that I would put in the economic development bucket, if you will, right? Like how do you go out and generate the revenue? And then the next two are going to be about 2 grant programs, which is versus just going back out and reinvesting in more marketing. We're going back out and reinvesting in both the Bend Sustainability Fund as well as the Bend Cultural Tourism Fund. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but on the list is the slate of organizations who proposed projects in the last cycle. This was round 2 of the Bend Sustainability Fund. The first round, I think we had 8 awards given. And you can see this year, and the great thing this year is some more urban facing projects, whether it's the Catalyst down in the Bend Central District, or it is, Cascade Theatrical Company doing a bunch of work on their community theater. And then you also had this project down along the river trail, just above Bend Parks and Rec headquarters that will create an ADA accessible kayak access point. So really cool slate of projects. But I think the big thing here is, while VisitBend is going out and doing all this marketing to create the activity, we are also repurposing those transient room tax collections into funding local organizations who are doing work that VisitBend will never do, but then also benefits the industry long term. So going back to, questions like Jeremy asked, what is the feedback loop? Well, one of the demand drivers of coming to Bend is recreational access, and we have to keep up with that demand. So things like access to the river are important elements. The Bend Cultural Tourism Fund's a little different. It actually funds grant programs for marketing. So the Catalyst side, which is that First Slate, Fathers Group, Playa, Greenhouse Cabaret, these are groups who are sort of percolating ideas and trying to ramp up ideas. And that's hence the name, the Catalyst Grant, is maybe it's not up and running, but it's an idea that has merit. How do we get money into these programs and help get them off the ground? The marketing side of this, as you'll note, are events that you probably know well or have heard of, and they're more in the marketing capacity. And these will help organizations like Bend Film be able to market in Portland and Seattle and bring out of area visitors to these events. And you can see the slate there. This Cultural Tourism Fund, I believe this was year 6. So this was a 6th round of grants and did roughly $400,000 through this program. Again, the biggest win here for me is VisitBend interacting with other local organizations within our community and supporting their initiatives and their efforts to operate great programs.
Kevin, real quick.
Yep.
So second year for the Sustainability Fund, and a big part of it was in concept. Visit Bend wasn't fully funding or all of the horsepower, right? They had to have some skin in the game. And that seemed to be a really valuable aspect to it. So is that continuing as part of the ethic for how you decide on how the money goes out?
Yeah, and to be clear, it depends on the project, right? Like when you look at, I believe Central Oregon Nordic Club on this list is a great example where that's a much smaller project, and that project was fully funded. So the group does a great job, in my opinion, of sitting down and saying, Petrick Properties and the Central District property, they have a lot of skin in the game. I think it was 75% of their budget they came up with on their own. The Sustainability Fund was about 25% of their budget. There are other groups who are much smaller who really have no funding to pull from, or they're strapped with the funding they have. So there have been examples where 100% of the project has been funded by the Sustainability Fund. But again, typically on the bigger scale, there's an expectation that a larger partner is going to come to the table with some amount of backing, that the fund would not be asked to cover all that.
Gotcha. And I'm thinking like Central Oregon Trail Lines, maybe you covered 100% of something, but they actually provided a lot of manpower. So their labor was key to getting the project done.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think what you're hitting on is what I love about the advisory council that serves to make suggestions on that fund is they are very thoughtful about what's being brought to the table by the local organization, what is being asked for, is it the right thing to invest? But you're spot on that sometimes it's fully funded, but they're bringing all the manpower or workforce to the table.
Great.
Keith just raised his
Oh, yeah.
hand too.
Keith, go ahead.
Yeah, Kevin, I was just wondering in the Bend Central everything here is pretty much a nonprofit, public use type thing, but isn't the Bend Central District thing a for-profit development. And so then what was the thinking there in helping subsidize that?
Yeah, when we set this program up, there was never an expectation that it would only fund nonprofits. If you remember last year, Mount Bachelor is probably the best example where they were putting 11 miles of new hiking trail onto the mountain to offset the impacts of the permit system on the Three Sisters Wilderness. And that's a for-profit business in which I think we funded half of that project in partnership with Powder funding the other half. But we don't really separate nonprofit from for-profit. At the end of the day, if it's going to build a facility and build something desirable to our visiting population as well as locals, then we want that project to come to light. And so that was the same filter the group looked at with this Central District property, was putting another sort of flagship project down in the Central District. I think what we've heard from this community and BDAV especially is this is an area of town we want to see get up and running. And we saw this as an opportunity to support that direction that we had heard from the community. And again, we have talked to Parks and Rec. I think we've talked to the city of Bend about even other ideas down in the Central District. This is just the first one we saw come forward.
And Kevin, you did extract some sort of public benefit from the Petrick property too, right, around the use of the plaza long-term.
Yeah. If we get in the details, there's a lot of agreements that they've made about the meeting space that will be there and being free to the public for certain user groups. And so they really want this to be a community meeting space that's for public good. And those were commitments they made that I think helped the advisory council decide that this was a project worth funding in this way. Good.
Yep.
This one is brand new this year. We're only 6 months in, but a little background that you think you guys saw in our business plan. We wanted to hire a workforce development director. We have done that in Jamie Deere. We shared the job with Visit Central Oregon. So it's a unique situation where Visit Bend and Visit Central Oregon are sharing the employment of Jamie. The point here is just to bring you up to speed on what's happened in those first 6 months. She has established a Workforce Wednesday program with the Boys and Girls Club, which throughout the course of the summer, over 8 weeks, the individuals at Boys and Girls Club will get out to Sun River. They're going to be with Cog Wild Mountain Bike Tour Company. They're going to be in Visit Bend for a full day. But the idea here is to get the students or the children within Boys and Girls Club to really see the hospitality sector as a place that they can start their work. And I think right now that's not a conversation happening. So I'm super excited about that. Industry workforce needs assessment. This is going out to all stakeholders to find out where the need areas are, where they're lacking in skills, what sort of trainings need to be developed. That's going to go out soon and close on February 28th. That's in partnership with OSU Cascades. And then this is a big one for me, the new board appointments. Heather Ficht and I had talked for a long time about why hospitality is not at the table when we talk about labor. And it just never has been. It's just not something this community's been willing to take on. And so she, don't know how voodoo magic something, was able to get her way onto the East Cascade Works Board. And then she's also recently joined the Oregon Hospitality Foundation. So the goal here really is that when we see a lot of investments from the state and or locally, they're going to things like construction, healthcare, tech as sort of big sectors. And we really feel strongly that we need to be talking about the hospitality workforce. And I'm going to point to the screen on the right. The $82,000 a year number you're looking at there is that what's become apparent is if your first job is in the hospitality service sector, you have higher earning potential long-term because of the soft skills you learn from that sector. So while maybe you don't stay in the travel and hospitality sector your entire career, the fact that your first job originated in that sector results in higher earnings long-term. There's also these other data points. We know the industry is a top 10 employer in the country, and we also know that 17% eventually become entrepreneurs. So what Jamie's really allowed us to do is have a better understanding of what's happening in the workforce space.
So to be clear on the board appointments.
Yep.
Are you sitting on ECW and Oregon Hospitality Foundation, or are they sitting on your board?
Nope, Jamie is sitting on
Jamie
their
sits on
boards.
both of their.
Yes.
Wow. Okay,
Yep.
Great.
Yep. So I told her she could take the second half of the year off because she's already achieved those benchmarks.
Nice.
It's great. We need to be at those tables, and we have not historically. This one's super interesting. You guys and ladies may have seen the recent news around resident sentiment in our community about the people who think the cost of tourism outweigh the benefits of tourism in our industry or in our community. We embarked and were some of the original funders of the Sustainable Tourism Lab at OSU Cascades. They just came out with their new study that showed that most or roughly half of the residents in Bend believe that the cost of tourism outweighs the benefit. This slide is really just to show a graphic of this, but we feel strongly as an organization that this conversation has been, it's been in this community for a long time, and we need to better understand where that sentiment exists and where the pain points from the industry exist that are having negative impacts on our community members. And we need to bring that community voice to the table. The reason I put this slide up here is you can see places like Corvallis, which are very much in sort of the discovery phase of tourism, just recently established a destination marketing organization. Then you have places like Willamette Valley. I don't know if you guys have been to McMinnville recently, but it is very much an up and coming destination in the state, and they're slightly further along this life cycle. And then you have places like Bend. Tourism in this community has been institutionalized. We know it. We've done it for a long time. And then you start hitting this tipping point, and you have places like Hawaii or the Northern Marianas Islands, where the resident sentiment towards the industry is so negative, you start to see real detractors. And what our goal with this research is to understand where that sentiment lies and try to meet it head on, so we don't end up in a decline phase, that we either end up sort of stabilizing and going through a rejuvenation phase, or find some ways to adapt our strategies, which I think Travis touched on earlier. Even our marketing has shifted over the last 3 to 4 to 5 years. What do we also need to be shifting? Is it more investment in the sustainability fund? Is it new programs, the workforce development? What are the real issues and how do we address those? And so our hope is in 3 years, I can come back and we can have a better understanding of where that sentiment exists. Probably not shocking to anybody in this room. There, early results are, if you've made a bunch of money, you're doing better. You believe the cost of tourism outweigh the benefits. If you are younger and you have a job in the industry, you think the tourism benefits outweigh the cost. So some of it's also being sliced along the lines of how long you've lived here, and some other indicators. But we've talked about it long enough as a community that we're trying to put some real numbers and data around it. Any questions on that one?
Maybe this question will come up later, but I'll ask it now on this slide.
Yeah.
So I guess, where does city infrastructure or city decision-making cause friction with tourism now? The obvious one is roads. We get very busy in the summer. We can't fit everybody on the roads. But what can the city do differently to minimize friction and allow us to have a robust tourism industry?
Yeah, this is my, I think on congestion specifically, right? Like we know we have roughly 3,500 hotel rooms. We have another 1,000 vacation rentals. If each one of those places has a single car at it with a family, that's 4,500 cars. I'm terrible at math, but let's say 5,000 cars. We also know we have 50,000 single family homes in this town. Each one of those homes has 2 cars. I think where I'm going with this is sometimes we want to scapegoat things that aren't really the problem.
Interesting.
And when I remember talking to Rory, who was in the transportation department before he left for Corvallis, we talked a lot about this, where a lot of those congestion points are in this town are not necessarily near where hotels or high density areas are. We also know things like the Whitewater Park, 70% of that use is coming from the local community. But it looks different in summer. Those high schoolers aren't going into a classroom and staying there all day. They're driving around town all day. So I think my biggest answer to that is right sizing the reality of the problem. And then you tack on 25,000 cars commuting into town every day. And where is the problem really originating from? And I think we've gotten pretty good at scapegoating this industry to be the problem.
Yeah, fair point. Thank you.
That got a hand raised.
Did it?
There.
Okay.
Kelly raised her hand.
All right, Kelly.
Sorry, just a quick follow-up on there. So I mean, it's so interesting to me when you see like these two, like Hawaii going up and Northern Mariana going down, and we're talking about kind of like community scapegoats. Like, what is the difference between communities that kind of get back on board and ones that continue to I guess for lack of a better word, be upset.
Yeah, I think and just so we're on the same page, I think the point of Hawaii being there is it's at that
Mhm.
does it hit a
Mm.
nation phase or does it decline?
Mhm.
To answer your question, and something that the industry has been terrible about historically is bringing that community perspective to the table. We typically build our boards with the GM of hotels and everybody else who has a financial gain by being on that board. I think places like Hawaii are a great example where they're bringing a lot more community perspective to their boards about what a marketing plan looks like. And so if I were to give you one perspective or opinion, it would be that I think we have to do a better job really engaging with the community about what the future of this destination is going to look like. And I think that's where Hawaii is right now, is do they take that input seriously? And do they go through a rejuvenation phase, or do they take the Northern Marianas Islands approach where the hoteliers have so much control that they sort of override community sentiment? Does that answer the question?
Yeah, and I guess I mean, like just one last little bit on this. This is an interesting slide. So if you looked at some place that was like, I mean, wholly considered a tourist town, I'm thinking like an Aspen or a Vail or something like that. I mean, do they kind of avoid this community sentiment altogether? I mean, do they not get the kind of backlash, or are they working so hard against it that people really deeply understand like the economic benefits of tourism? Like how do some towns, I mean, that are so wholly tourist based,
Yeah,
I don't know, be on a different part of this life cycle?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because you do have those towns where, Moab, Utah, where let's call it 70% of their economy is based on tourism, whereas here it's closer to 15 to 20% is tied to tourism. So I think there, at least what I've heard, there's an understanding of how important the industry is and how important that 70% is. And so I think they're still taking community input, but I think those community members very much understand the value. And I think here, because we are not solely a tourism town and we have a lot of other economies, the conversation becomes a little different. But I think we would all agree in this room that what tourism and the $340 million a year in direct spending to keep restaurants open, et cetera, also then has intangible benefits to those of us who get to live here. So I think that, some of those communities you referred to are so dependent on tourism. The narrative's always been different. And I think we just have more work to do here in terms of bringing the community along to support us in what we're trying to do.
Thank you.
I'll say one thing maybe you're not saying, and it's because you're representing Visit Bend, but the rejuvenation side, like how do you do that? In my opinion, from where I sit, it's keep doing the exact engagement you have been doing for years. I think you're doing a phenomenal job engaging the community in that dialogue. The Visit Like a Local, I think, is the campaign that I think of that's what's going to make locals more accepting. So keep doing that work.
Thank you for saying that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's very much culture. Like I think Hawaii is, you go there because it has a specific feel, right? You want to see a luau, you want to do these specific things. So if you, part of America, but if you make it part of the like normal culture that we all experience when we're in LA or something, that becomes less desirable.
Mhm.
So what's the thing with Bend? It's that you're outdoors, it's that you're doing those things. So I think that's right in the same vein of what you were saying is make it about Bend. That's why it's fun to be here. And the people that live here because they want to do those things.
Okay, so financial and industry updates. This is where we're going to go a little bit back the other direction, as Nate talked about sort of what we're seeing right now in terms of how the industry is performing. And as Nate alluded to, I think we don't know exactly what's going on. We're not unique, but there is some slipping happening in the industry or softening. Is that economic fears? Did we just do so well through COVID because we are one of the few destinations you could drive into and get some fresh air, and now international destinations are opening and that competitiveness is pulling people elsewhere? That's still yet to be determined, but this is what's going on. So this is a quick look. US is sort of just down occupancy rate. Oregon is a state about 5% down. You can see the Pacific region about 4% down. And I want to note, this is for the month of December. These aren't annual. And so I want to be very careful that what we're talking about is not necessarily a trend as much as just what we're seeing right now. And it's something we have to pay attention to that we'll get to. You can see where Portland is, you can see the coast down, you can see Eastern Oregon significantly down, and then obviously Central Oregon off about 11% for the month of December. City of Bend, from an occupancy rate standpoint, was off 10%. This is also for hotels specifically. I will note that when we look at vacation rental data, it is fairly similar. There's not a whole lot different in vacation rental occupancy rates than there is in the hotel side. So this is reflective of what's going on. This is starting to get into why it matters. So the dark bar that goes out throughout this entire thing was the FY22 collections. We then placed a budget and agreement with the city of Bend that said we would expect about an 8% growth in total collections over what we saw in the prior fiscal year. That blue line was doing exactly what we thought it would do up until the last 2 months. The last 2 months, which I'll show you in the next slide, is about 10% down for each of those months. So that blue line drops below projections. And then those the two dotted lines are going to be scenarios that could happen from here. Does that make sense? Kind of. This one I think is going to help. So this is looking at the hard numbers. So when you look at July all the way down through June, you have FY22 collections on the left. Then you have half of the year. We know what those collections are. And then the blue numbers are assuming we're off about 5% through the remainder of the year. Again, total crystal ball stuff that we don't know. The reason this matters, though, is these transient room taxes, we have to remember 65% of those go to the city's general fund. 35% are contracted to the city of Bend or to Visit Bend. So when the industry doesn't perform, there's less tax revenue flowing through to the general fund. There is obviously also implications to Visit Bend's budget and how do we spend through the Bend Sustainability Fund or those other grant programs and then our own marketing. So this is not a doom and gloom like it's falling off the cliff, but I also feel obligated to let you know that this is sort of what we're seeing and where it's going. The December number, the reason there's an asterisk is this is, the finance team right now is sort of fine tuning this all, and they usually get us the hard number by the 10th of the month. So this is their initial projections. So there's a couple scenarios here. Obviously, you continue at sort of this 10% off in total collections. Maybe it balances out at 5%. Maybe this is just a tiny dip and we come right back out of it. There's a lot of unknowns, but as an organization, and I know in talking with Clayton and others in the finance side, we are in close communication about where this is going. This is Jeremy, before I go.
Sorry, coming in a little late there. Kevin, if you took the anomaly of 2020 and 2021 out of the equation, how do the numbers that you're projecting look compared to years 19 and 20?
Yeah, it was one of the things I wanted to bring up, but it's a great question. So if you go back and compare against 2019, which let's just call that the last sort of normal time, we are still significantly up in terms of total collections. There has been new hotel room supply that's come on. The average daily rate has also significantly gone up over the course of those few years. So we are still up against 2019, which is why this isn't sort of a doom and gloom scenario, that this isn't indicative that we aren't still desirable to the consumer. I think this is a little bit of a correction, if you will. But it doesn't, I guess the reason for bringing up, it doesn't take away from the fact that both Visit Bend and the city's budget accounted for the projection, not this new revised projection.
Right.
But by no means are we sitting here saying, oh man, Bend is less desirable, the industry is doing something else. It's just that we are most likely not going to hit what we set out to project. These two, again, just want to be fully transparent with you. There's a couple scenarios here. If TRT continues to decline, scaled back marketing programs is an obvious thing that's going to happen. The way the two the Cultural Tourism Fund and Sustainability Fund are established is they're a percentage of revenue coming into the organization. So naturally, those will shrink a little and there won't be as much money going out through those two programs. And then, at some point, we'll have to have the conversation about the possible request of rainy day funds, which is something that we've talked about. And to date, ever since it was established, we've never found a way to sort of go out and utilize that. There's a couple things that could happen depending on what we see happening going into next year and how aggressive we want to be with the grant programs. That could be a moment to trigger rainy day fund use. The other thing that's happening right now is because of this cash flow, and then there was another sort of wonky financial thing out of the beginning of the year, is just from an operating account within Visit Bend right now. We're at the time of year where we spend the most amount of money on marketing because it's the biggest need time. And it's the same time of year we see the smallest checks coming in from the city because it's the slowest tourism time. So when we're doing the most spending, we feel like we should be doing, we're also receiving the smallest amount of revenue. And that's putting a pinch on operating account. That is our job to manage through, but just it's an interesting anomaly that we deal with.
And sorry, that's all, it's normally like that?
It's normally like
Okay.
that due to a few little things that happened with this year's budget. It's more compressed than desirable, but we are managing through it. And then obviously TRT rebounds and everything sort of stays business as usual. And then the last one is just a few miscellaneous updates. We have board of directors seats open. Anybody interested? We have established some new strategic partners for areas that we are not experts in. And I'll point to things like Leave No Trace. You maybe saw that announcement where we have a really robust partnership with Leave No Trace about communicating to our visitors about, what a good behavior in the backcountry or front country is. It could be groups like Protect Our Winters. We are never going to be a group that can tackle climate change, but climate most certainly is going to have a long-term impact on our destination. And there are organizations out there who are managing and advocating for better policy. So there's stuff in that space where we're building those partnerships. Business plan timeline will probably be back in front of you sometime in May, presenting draft of our business plan. And then the only other one is we were paying really close attention to legislative issues around transient room tax. Every year something comes up where there's more flexibility or, a new way to reinvest transient room tax. So nothing super concerning right now, just that we're paying attention. If you have any questions specific to that, I'm always happy to answer them. And we just consumed a lot of your time. So.
Talk about legislative updates. You have a lobbyist that's working on the waiver issue for, what is it, recreational immunity type thing?
Well, I know Eric Kanzler, who's a local lobbyist, is really involved in that. We signed on for the waiver issue just because it's what I've learned about it is become such a issue for businesses to operate. You've seen fishing guide businesses go off the table. You've seen really anybody who has paid recreation. So think about the Cog Wilds or even the Bend Marathon. I mean, these are all businesses who, once you pay for recreation and you have a waiver associated with that, that waiver really doesn't stand up in the state of Oregon right now. And so a lot of businesses are feeling the pinch. So we've signed on. I think there's about 120 other businesses at this point, and we're working with Hood River, McMinnville, and Lincoln City as other destinations who we're also interested in signing on. And then there's a whole Bill Perry and Orla, and then Travel Oregon typically handle the other legislative issues and then keep us up to date.
Yeah, I see that as such a big issue for the tourism industry.
I think that's the only tourism issue on kind of the city's watch list as well, that Eric kind of provides us every week. So nothing about room tax or anything like that. Not yet. Oh, boy.
Great.
Hopefully it stays that way.
Excellent. Thanks for the update, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, just a quick discussion of the roundtable that I was able to participate in. Is that all you were thinking there, Ben?
Yeah, I think just since you participated, Travis, if there are any key takeaways, I'll stop sharing here.
Yeah.
And you and Councilor Perkins can maybe both provide your update at the same time. I broke them out to make the agenda look longer.
There you go. Well, yeah, I found it a valuable forum for discussion. It's a new format that City Council has put out there. Yeah, no, I thought it was very useful. So how was it actionable on your side from City Council?
Yeah, I mean, January was quite the month for council. I think since I've been here last, we had We had 3 meetings to fill a vacancy on council, which hopefully will be the last vacancy that we have to fill for the next couple of years. And then the following week, we held the 4 listening sessions on affordable housing and homelessness and housing and economic development, which was the one you attended, and then one on transportation, and then one on accessible and effective government. And we also had multiple emails and phone calls and forms that were sent in from committees and commissions. And we got the results of our community survey, which I don't know if you've seen sort of talked about in the news at all. Not a surprise to me, but homelessness and housing were by far the top concerns of the people in our community, followed by, I think, transportation and growth. And then it really, dropped down from there. So I thought the listening sessions, were amazing conversations. I mean, I thought that I personally got a lot out of it. And when we went into goal setting, I think it really helped guide us in when we started talking about, what we wanted to achieve for the next 2 years. But I'd love to kind of hear more about specifically the one that you attended.
Yeah, what I thought that was nice was you could synthesize some thoughts from different perspectives, right? The people around the table, they might give their opening salvo of kind of, this is my wish list. And then we would put some flesh on that and see why parts of it don't work, parts of it do work. So the specific action items, just take permitting, for instance, there were several action items that came out of that I feel like staff is going to be busy implementing. But I was really thankful that the entire council gave it their attention. So it was good.
Yeah, and I think another thing that was valuable was, I think it helped us really look at what are areas that we need to be advocates as counselors, whether it be, on a state level, on a federal level, or locally. What are areas we need to partner with, the county or, private organizations, and what are the areas where we just need to go out and do something. And so I think when we went into goal setting, we were really cognizant of that, and that helped us focus as well. Yeah, so after that, and after those, we went into 1.5 days of goal setting. And I'd say that it was a really amazing process. The most lively conversation came around transportation. And one of the things that came out of that, I think, was that we really need to have a step back look at transportation. How much money do we have? What are the projects? What can we do? What can't we do? And create some specific strategies based on that conversation, because I think that we are getting caught up in, this project or that project or this, or, this thing that we wanted to do specifically as counselors, and not looking at the bigger picture of transportation in our community. So I think also we went into it being more aware this time of what can we actually achieve over the next couple of years, not like we want everything, in the next couple of years. So I think that was also, it helped us focus our conversation going forward. So right now we are just in the process of sort of getting these 4 major goal areas to have a few general strategies behind them. And then I think we'll vote on those at the end of March. And then it goes into, in May and June, it actually turns into a work plan. And that's like the specific, the how, the when, all of these things are going to happen. And then the budget comes after that in June. We adopt the budget, which follows that. So there's 4 main areas that we came up with. One is affordable housing and sustainable development. And then we had transportation, public safety, and then accessible and effective government. And I thought, I don't have any slides. You will all just slide it out anyway by Visit Bend. But actually, it's not even on a slide yet. So this is how new all of this stuff is. This is very preview stage. This is very, high level stage, because the city is still working through a lot of this. Some of the things I thought that you would be interested to pull out under affordable housing and sustainable development. The housing needs part, we have, investment in the Bend Central District, particularly from a housing perspective. We also have the middle income policy incentives and implementation. And then under the affordable housing and sustainable development category, planning for growth, we talk about CFEC, obviously, and needing to plan for that. The housing needs analysis, evaluating the efficient use of land within the UGB, complete the economic needs analysis, evaluate integrating an urban reserve program in coordination with the county, and align land uses with infrastructure plans. Then in the affordable housing and sustainable development, economic development subheading, we have issue an RFP to engage master developers for city-owned land at Juniper Ridge with a focus on industrial land and possible housing options. We have convening partners to explore solutions to address childcare and workforce development. And we have economic development options for the Bend Airport and the air traffic control tower funding. And then finally, just a couple that I thought you might be interested in. Under accessible and effective government, we have begin the community engagement process for the new city hall to inform programming and design and to explore public-private partnership opportunities for the city hall. We have the Juniper Ridge Public Works Campus, and we have improving the permitting process and review times, which I know is something that is very, very
Still on there?
Yeah, still on there. But there's actually a lot that is happening before these goals take, so these goals won't take effect until July. I think you're going to get an update, I'm guessing soon on the permitting. There's a,
Yeah,
So-
Colin had his memo.
yeah, exciting.
Thought maybe
news.
in March. Get Colin back in front of this group to kind of talk about some of the work.
You
Good
seem
stuff.
excited. Are you being sarcastic?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I'm actually, yeah, it was great to see this. We got this memo right before goal setting and it was like, oh, yes,
Okay.
this stuff is happening. This is great, finally, because I know that particularly you have been asking for all this. And that was one of the things that came out of that listening session was like permitting. And it came out of both of the two housing ones that we had. It was made abundantly clear that that is a very large issue for our community.
Well, and it's differentiating streams of incoming permit requests. It's different timelines for each. So, yeah,
Mhm.
that's great.
Yeah.
I know I saw Jeremy has a question, so I'll let him go first and then I've got one.
Oh, nope,
No
no
question?
question.
Sorry, yeah, no question.
Okay, well, my question was leaving my brain, but I wrote it down. Okay, middle income housing incentives. I think that was what you said.
Yes.
That was the only tax exemption we did not implement last year.
Mhm.
So that may be one lever. Are there any other levers the city has for middle income?
Well, the good news, well, Lynn has some things that are that she's cooking up right now. The great news is that we have hired a middle income staff person to basically work on that for the next few years. And part of the advocacy will obviously be, working on from a state level, fixing this middle income tax exemption so that it's something that we can have in our community.
Gotcha. And it seems like there's a good tool there. We just didn't have a model and we wanted to get the other three out. So I think revisiting that sooner rather than later, I would
Yep.
definitely be willing to jump back on that committee. And I think I would be remiss if I didn't say the chamber is really focused on middle income housing. So yeah, Katie would
Absolutely.
love to be a part of that.
Mhm.
Great.
That's one of those places that when we talk about sort of the advocacy, the partnering and the doing, it kind of actually is, it can be all right for the middle income. We can advocate from a state level, we can partner with the chamber and we can do things locally as well. So
Absolutely. I like looking to other problem solvers that they've already addressed and solved the problem. And one of my clients had responded to 2 RFPs in Boise that included a significant portion of middle income along with affordable. And it was the city that put out the RFP and it was it seemed like a really good type of project.
Mhm.
So anyway, we've got samples out there.
Yep.
Did you have something as well?
I'm just curious about the airport to know a little bit. I mean, I certainly could Google the rest of it, but just from a city's perspective or city council, like what the framework of the airport.
Dicky,
Oh,
I would just
sorry.
say that we would love the airport to be an asset.
Okay.
And
fair.
yeah, and part of you jump in, but the air traffic control funding is, they received a grant, the airport received a grant for that. It's something that's very much needed, but there's a matter of extra funding that needs to supplement that. Okay, so that it can come to fruition, but I'll let you.
Yeah, the airport's in a bit of a holding pattern, no pun intended right now. So there's an operational side of the airport, right? And we can schedule an update. there's also a real estate asset side of the airport, and that part is really getting worked on right now. And I think is kind of what's wrapped up in those goals, right? And making it I think on a good year, it's kind of cost neutral in the council budget, but in a bad year, it doesn't generate revenue, right? It's a negative. Yeah.
Obviously not wanting it as a negative, but thinking about like partnerships or resources and where to invest time and money. I think if it's going in a negative way, of course you want to rectify that and at least make it not a disadvantage to the city, but.
And as Don Mill and Edco would tell you, I mean, it generates a lot of interest. There's some real challenges to developing out there. It's kind of a diamond in the rough when it comes to economic development. I mean, you look at Epic Aircraft, big employer out there, potential opportunities for others, but there's a whole bunch of work. It's really hard to develop it in an airport. You've got federal government, it's in the county, so it's not a city zoning, and then it's a city-owned asset. It's really funky out there. So
No, that helps. Thank you.
I don't know if I clarified anything.
No.
I just wanted to say holding pattern related to the airport.
That's really good. It's like you planned that.
Well done. Nice. Well, thank you for the
Thank
update.
you. And I'll keep you posted as we go through this process, continue this process, I should say.
Thanks for all the hard work.
Yeah. All right, Ben, you've got subcommittee and working group questions.
Yeah, and this is a good segue. So as we move into council goal or through council goal setting, it's also our budget time. So our biennial budget runs from July 1st of this year through June 30th, 2025. My goodness. So a couple of things, really looking for folks that want to sit on a working group for 1 or 2 meetings around the business advocacy budget. Super simple budget. It's a budget that really is funded by business registrations, potentially a small general fund allocation to help subsidize our EDCO contract, but there's really 2 major costs, the business advocate position itself and our contract with EDCO. So we want to kind of make sure, have some time to kind of vet that out before bringing it back to BDAB, maybe 2 one-hour meetings in the next month or so. We're also going to have to talk a little bit about revenue, so a potential increase to the business registration fee. So if that jumps out to anyone as being of interest, I hope there's a few folks that are willing to kind of carve out some time. Like I said, you don't need to be a financial whiz. I mean, if I can understand the budget, it's pretty straightforward. So yeah, if anyone wants to, I'll send an email out on this afterwards, but if that's jumping out right now, and Gary, I saw you kind of twitch there, if you're willing to. Perfect. I don't want to commit you if you're not.
After hours with beers.
Well, this will be a public meeting. So anyone watching will notice these meetings. We'll have to live stream them. But yeah, we can do happy hour afterwards. We could do a 4 to 5 meeting followed by an informal happy hour that would not be funded by government funds. Yeah, great. So yeah, if that jumps out to anyone, send me an email. The second one, and I just want to kind of tee this up, especially with Jeremy and Gary being new. We've discussed this in the past and we kind of had a false start on this back in the fall. The other revenue growth option that we need to look at is around permit fees. So that's something the full community and economic development department's looking at. We have a consultant team on board, but I think, and I don't want to get too far ahead of myself either, at the end of February at our advocacy subcommittee meeting, and that's a group that really hashes out bigger policy issues before they come to BDAB. We're either going to take a look at it then, or we're going to take a look at these potential fee increases in March with this group and then bring it back to BDAB. So I will send out the info to everyone on those, but certainly Gary with your and Jeremy, both with your areas of interest, and Brianna, you're already on the advocacy subcommittee, but want to kind of tee that up because yeah, fee increases, not for SDCs. That's a bigger discussion coming, I think, in the next round of council goals over the next 2 years, but really just those permitting fees that new development pays. Hopefully look at some scenarios there and kind of hear from staff on the need and how it could be implemented. So don't want to miss that opportunity for kind of a development side input on this discussion. So I'll send.
Is that going to be in parallel with SDCs or wait till the SDC conversation's done?
It's going to happen before the SDC. So the SDC discussion, and Russ is in the back there. Russ, wave if I'm way off, but the SDC discussion just getting started. Gary, are you participating on that subcommittee? So great. So yeah, that sounds right. Probably 4 to 6 meetings of that group. fee discussion separate really would need to, if there are fee changes or whatever those fee changes look like, would need to be implemented with or before the July 1st biennial budget. So that fees will happen first. SDC changes will happen next after that. And yeah, we also have the economic development strategy group. Travis and I met on Friday about that. So we'll get that spun up in the next couple of weeks here. But I'll send an email out with info on that. And if anyone's watching and those sound interesting and you're not on BDAB, you're watching on YouTube, we will, there's always one person watching. We will post these all online once they're scheduled too. So that is it.
Great. Thank you. Future topics. So does anybody have anything they feel we've not been addressing that we should be addressing?
And I'll throw one out there if there's interest from the group. So Matt Stewart is our new real estate director, used to run our urban renewal programs and is actually living in Phoenix and moving up here in March. So he's kind of been working remotely as he transitions up here. But I think we want to get him in front of this group to talk about Juniper Ridge and our strategy there, probably in the next couple of months. Matt can touch a little bit maybe on the airport as well, but more so around the challenges rather than the solutions. But I've had that notion in my back pocket for a while, but given the discussion today, if that sounds of interest, can kind of work on.
That'd be great. And then I asked Ben on Friday for a couple of things. One was innovation. We have a chief innovation officer. Or...
Yeah, Stephanie Betteridge. Yeah, we can. Yes. So
I
thank you
think
for the
there's
reminder.
opportunities there for us to understand what she's focused on and how that might impact economic development opportunities. And then you had talked about bringing our is it DEI coordinator or?
So we do not have a DEI director right now.
Oh, okay.
We may soon, right? I think we're. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Summer.
might want to put that one on hold. But also you had asked also about the innovation district and OSU Cascades, and maybe Brianna, you may have too. I'm meeting with someone that's kind of picking up the ball on that with Kelly Sparks leaving. I think we're grabbing coffee on Friday. So we'll kind of plant the seed around a status update there.
Great. Any other topics from the group? Gary, welcome to your first meeting.
Yeah.
Any thoughts? Yeah,
That's good. Yeah, just soaking it all in.
excellent.
Jeremy has something.
Jeremy?
Yeah, not so much a new topic, but a request for a schedule that I'm assuming it's a draft schedule at this point, but with all of these different types of analysis that are being done around the economic opportunities analysis, the housing needs analysis, there's a sequencing to a lot of the work that we're endeavoring to get done as BDAB, but also that City Council's leading. Is somebody, or is there a way to get some visibility into expected start times and durations for that type of work?
That is a great question. That's something, Brian Rankin, our growth management manager, long range planning manager, and I actually were sitting down just last week to kind of try to map this out. So by March, we can have kind of a graphic that shows how these align. Because there are products in the economic development strategy that would be needed for an economic opportunities analysis. Others are maybe tied to efforts that wouldn't necessarily be needed for that EOA work, right? So kind of mapping it all out, just like you described, Jeremy. And Russ is walking up here. So Russ, go ahead.
So good afternoon, everybody. Russ Grayson, Chief Operations Officer. So we just submitted the work plan to the state that kind of incorporated all the requirements of the climate friendly and equitable city rulemaking process. So because you can either follow their prescriptive path, how they were set in the rules, or you can propose your own. We decided to propose our own. So we're waiting to hear back on that, as well as the results of a pending lawsuit that is going on. There's 2 lawsuits that were filed, one by a collection of cities and another by industry representatives. So we're thinking of trying to get in front of council maybe sometime in April. We're hoping to get resolution on both of those to lay all this out, because there is a defined plan on how we want to do that. And we can definitely bring that here as well. So you can see the first thing we're working on is the housing needs analysis, which is that's kind of moving through, and we're going to be getting results on that here, or the first take of it in the next couple of weeks. And then we'll start that employment needs analysis, which will have a lot of input by VDOT. So maybe later this spring, I think Ben was alluding to, we can come back.
And I think at least in terms of the economic development strategy, which is BDAB's work, right? BDAB's effort, can bring that to you by March, at least to show how everything fits and understanding if you go into Brian Rankin's office right now, there's papers glued to the wall and sort of,
It's a little bit of a beautiful mind world.
Yeah.
You know?
But I think he's working on spinning it down.
Yeah,
So,
to make it digestible.
So Russ, on the 2 lawsuits that I hear on Friday, they lost their stays.
That happened a couple of weeks ago. So there's 8 cities in Oregon that filed a lawsuit. With that, they asked for a stay. The judge in, I want to say late December, could have even been on my birthday, said that the stay was denied. So the rules did go into effect. They're in effect now. But in that ruling, they're trying to expedite because of the significance of this, they're trying to expedite the actual hearing of the case and moving it through. So they're trying to, I think they're moving the briefs a little bit faster than normal, just because of whatever the outcome could be. But
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
It sounded like Jeremy had some suggestions or was volunteering to be on a committee to help with that.
No, sorry to give you that impression. No, I'll help however I can.
perfect. Yeah. And stay tuned for an email. I'll try to break these all down by tomorrow and folks can weigh in and decide what they want to participate in. Try not to make it too time intensive, especially the budget stuff, but.
And I don't know if this is where Jeremy was going, but after being on the committee for a little while, it would be like we set goals, we do things. It is a little bit hard to navigate like what we're making decisions on in each of these meetings.
Sure.
So I don't know if that is sort of where you were going, but it would help me like, okay, here's a year or a fiscal year or whatever it is, or the next 6 months. These are the topics and the decisions and what objectives or goals we have are feeding into that to actually help what the city council is trying to do. Because I do feel like they are a little bit disjointed in some way, or I can't see the big picture. Maybe it's that I can't see it. I don't know. And just trying to navigate that a little bit or be a little more strategic about how we respond or are receiving information.
Because that's actually one of the goals that we have is to more for the next biennium is to align like what the council is doing with what the committees and the commissions are doing better.
Good.
That's very relevant.
Okay.
But we do have some benchmarks that really you have to work through in the next 4 to 6 months. So yeah, I'll start mapping some stuff out. I mean, BDAP's always a little bit reactive based on what council's discussing, right? And if there is a business interest in it, but yeah, can I absolutely give you kind of a calendar of where things land. I mean, as Kevin mentioned, he'll be back in May with that business plan, which is a BDAP action at that point. So there's a few other ones like that we'll want to map out. So,
Yeah, it could even be broken into 2 things, like the things that have to happen, and then these are
sure.
more strategic brain, like how can we navigate or participate in the conversation to influence change versus react to change.
Perfect. Yeah, that's great.
Good. Anybody else have anything for the good of the order before we adjourn? It is early. We'll give everybody a half an hour of their day back. All right, not hearing any. We're adjourned. Thanks, everybody, for your participation.